Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Let's Talk Tenkara podcast. I'm Brendan Harden, and today I want to do something a little bit different than I've done in past episodes. I'm going to go over every rod that I either own or have owned and that I've caught fish on. Just kind of give a short review and just go over everything in my lineup and everything that I've had in the past. I will say beforehand, there's only one rod that I don't currently have that I have had before. But let's get started. So my very first rod is one that I'm sure a lot of you have seen on Amazon. It's a very cheap rod, and it is not a great rod. That is going to be this yellow guy right here. This is definitely made in China. Its extended length is 270 centimeters, or roughly just shy of 9 feet. Its collapsed weight or length, which is one thing that I do like about this rod, is 14 and a half. That is without the tip plug in. One thing that I did with this rod after I got it is I added a lanyard on the back end. And that way I could, actually I believe I added this one in the tip too, but that way I could loop it through itself and not worry about losing that lanyard. Just something that I personally liked about it because I hate losing tip plugs, and I've lost a few, and we'll get into that later. But this rod overall is very stiff. It's not balanced very well. It wants to fall forward as you're holding it. It doesn't cast bad. It's not pleasant though. You're going to feel every cast. It's not a rod that you're going to forget in your hand, as a lot of people will say, you know, a good rod, you're going to forget it. You have it. It just becomes part of you. This isn't that rod. This rod is one, I still have it because I can throw it in a backpack and I'm not worried about it getting broken. Like I said, I picked it up on Amazon. I actually bought two of them at the same time, and I paid, I want to say $15. If I can find these rods again, I'll throw a link in the description below. Everything we go over today, I'll throw a link to below. But not my favorite rod. If you're looking for a cheap option that you can throw in a backpack or something because you don't want to worry about breaking it, it's not terrible. But overall, on a scale of 5, 1.5, not great. The next rod, after fishing that rod once, I decided I needed a real rod. And so I dove into YouTube. I found some reviews on the Dragon Tail Shadowfire. And this is a 365 centimeter rod, or 12 feet long, and collapsed length without the tip plug is 22.5 inches. This is a good rod, great starter rod. If you just buy the rod on Amazon, it comes in under $100. I went for the starter kit. It was like 115, I think. Great rod for a good starting choice. Feels good. Balanced well. I can cast this rod all day, and I'm not gonna regret it. As far as cheap rods go that I've fished, this is the best one by far. The only downside for me for this rod was the length, being it's only 12 feet long. A lot of the creeks that I fish are just too small for this rod. There's a lot of overhang, and so the next rod that I went to after this, I fished this rod for quite a while, even on small streams. I mean, I would use this rod if this one was just too long, but at the time, those were what I had, and so that's what I did. But then from there, I went to the Dragon Tail Foxfire when it was released. I jumped on the Kickstarter as soon as that one became available. And I was in the first batch, I believe, to get that rod back in, I want to say that was in 2020, maybe 2021. I feel like it was 2020. It was 2020. That rod, though, fishable at 6, 7.5, and 9 feet, with Dragon Tail's signature, or I don't know if it's their signature necessarily, but they do a carbon fiber and fiberglass blend on those rods. So it's a very soft action rod. Great for small streams. But for me, while I do fish a lot of small streams, I catch or I was catching some bigger fish in those small streams. And, actually talking to Brent with Dragon Tail previously, at an expo in, I believe it was in April, he said, people either love or they hate this rod. And for me, I didn't hate it. It just wasn't a love for me. And so I fished it for a long time. I fished it a lot because it was my small stream rod, and that's what I primarily fish. But I ended up moving away from it eventually, and we'll get into that rod here in a little bit. But after I fished those 3 rods for a long while, like 3.5 years, those were my 3 rods. I decided that I needed a big fish rod. And so I looked around at a lot of different rod companies. I went to expos and felt different rods in hand. And I ended up connecting with Ruben over at Wasatch Tenkara Rods. And my first Wasatch Tenkara rod was the T-Hunter, fishable at 12, 13.5, and 15 feet. This rod is a great rod. I love this rod. In doing my research for big fish rods, like I said, I visited with a lot of different rod companies. I held different rods, and this ended up being where I decided to go. And part of that was because I even fished a couple rods. I'll throw that in first. I did fish a couple rods. I fished one from Tenkara Rod Company, and I fished one from someone else. I don't remember who it is right now, but I ended up reaching out to Ruben with Wasatch Tenkara Rods, and he was like, "Yeah, come up. We'll meet out, and you can look at all the rods that I've got, and we'll see if one just fits what you're looking for." So I went up there, met with Ruben. We went fishing. I fished only the T-Hunter after looking at every rod that he had at that point, which was the Sharpshooter, T-Hunter, Middle Fork, the Samurai, and then they were just getting ready to release Rodzilla at that point. So I was one of the first people to actually get to hold Rodzilla, and that was kind of cool. He also keyed me in on a rod that came out late last year. Yeah, late last year. And he told me about it early. I was one of the first people, I believe, that knew about it, and we'll get into that rod. I do have that one as well. But this rod, to me, I've primarily fished it at 13.5 feet. It's collapsed length, I'll throw in really quick, 22.5 inches. This rod, to me, in that middle length, feels phenomenal. I love this rod because I can go a little bit shorter to 12 feet. I can go a little bit longer to 15 feet if I need just that extra little bit of length. But this rod is a monster. Like, my customers have caught 20+ inch fish on this rod, no problems. It's a great rod. It feels good in the hand. It really does fish well, and it's one of my favorite rods. It gets used a lot, especially as I'm guiding. This is a great rod. I really do love this rod. From there, I wanted to get into small streams again, and like I said, that the Foxfire just wasn't it for me. A lot of people love that rod. I'm not discrediting that rod at all. Just for me and some of the fish that I was catching in these smaller streams, it just wasn't a good fit. And so I ended up going back to Ruben, and I picked up the Sharpshooter, also fishable at 6, 7.5, and 9 feet. Collapsed length on that one is going to be Sharpshooter 21.25 inches. So this rod is a little bit stiffer than the Foxfire. It's a 6-4 action rod, completely fiberglass, but this rod feels so good to me. It fishes well. I've caught everything from little 3 and 4 inch fish to I've gotten up into 20-inch fish, and this rod just handles everything. I've thrown at it like a champ. Truly a great small stream rod. Like I said, my favorite small stream rod up until recently. I loved this rod. I still love this rod. From there, I had Sharpshooter, I had T-Hunter, So I had 6 foot to 9 foot and 12 foot to 15 foot. So I needed 9 foot to 12 foot. And so I picked up the middle fork, fishable at 9, 10 foot 6, and 12 foot. Collapsed length on that one is going to be 22 inches. The middle fork is my recommendation for anyone coming from Western fly fishing into Tenkara, because of that 9 foot length. It's going to be very similar action to a 5-weight fly rod, and it's a really good starting rod. With a lot of the smaller streams that people like to fly fish on, that their fly rods just don't work because obviously you've got extra line, things like that. This rod comes in and fishes really well. You do have that extra length with 10.5 and 12 feet that you're going to be able to reach out just a little bit further. And it's a great rod. And like I said, my highest recommended starting rod would be the middle fork as far as rods that I personally have fished. From there, I wanted something big. I didn't have a very big budget to get it. There wasn't a lot on the market that in the US that met what I was looking for. Wasatch had the Rodzilla, didn't have the budget for the Rodzilla, so I ended up going cheap and I went with the Gocher Red Fox. Now this rod is looking at the wrong spot there, 20.5 feet long roughly, collapses down to 27 inches, and it is heavy. It is very tip heavy. It does get the line out there. I mean, obviously I'm using 20-foot rod with at least 20 foot of line. Gets the line out there well. I liked this rod a lot when I first got it for ponds, lakes, just areas that my 15-foot T-Hunter wasn't long enough to get into. I actually took it up to Idaho to Thousand Springs Park, and we got out there and I flipped this rod around. I caught a couple fish on it. It's not a bad rod as far as what it is for the money. I think I paid like $20-something for this rod. I don't recommend it if you're looking for something cheap. Absolutely jump on it. Gocher has a lot of cheap rods. They're a great entry point if you're looking for something cheap to just decide if it's something you want to get into. But this rod, as far as fish goes, I've caught 15+ inch fish on it. I haven't caught anything huge. I've caught small fish on it. You can't feel the fish. It's a very stiff rod. In fact, the action on it, it's not technically a Tenkara rod. Even it's just a fixed line rod, and the action is super hard. If that does not tell you how stiff this rod is, I do not know what will. It is a very stiff rod. Not my favorite rod, like I said, but it filled the gap for what I was looking for at the time. From there, I was given for Christmas a Prospect 2-way. This rod is a 6.4 action. It is 270 centimeters or 320 centimeters. So that's going to be 8'10" roughly by about 10.5 feet. Collapsed length is about 22 inches. I do love this rod. I love this rod. It's very lightweight. It's balanced very well. Fishes level line extremely well. You can feel everything through this rod. Very sensitive rod. My one complaint with this rod is availability of spare parts. Because it is a Japanese-made rod, the Nissin Prospect is a phenomenal rod. Where it is a Nissin Prospect, it's a little bit more common rod, so it's a little bit easier to get spare parts for. But for the most part, if you need a spare part, you're ordering it from Japan. This rod it's incredible. It really is. It opened my eyes to what traditional Japanese Tenkara would be as far as their rods go. And it's a great rod. It really is. I love this rod. As far as what I fish, I don't get this rod out a ton because it's an awkward length for me. It's 8'10" to 10.5. like I got a lot of places I fish that I can fish this rod, but for the most part, this rod, it's a small stream rod, and a lot of my small streams are just too tight for it. And so it doesn't get used a ton. I fished those rods for a long time. Loved each and every one of those rods. And then I started getting more into like more niche rods as far as like specialty, weird lengths, things like that. So again, we're going to jump back into Wasatch Tenkara rods. And this next rod I picked up earlier this year, and it is right now my favorite rod, hands down. That is the Baby Rodzilla. This rod is a 6'4" action, fishable at 8, 9, and 10 feet. As far as rods go, this is a phenomenal rod. When I first got this rod, I took it out to a community pond with my son. We started out the day with the T-Hunter. He fished. He caught about a 15-inch trout. It was great. He caught a couple fish on that rod after my 4-year-old son, who was only 3 and 10 months roughly at the time. As he lost his attention, I decided that it was my turn to fish a little bit more. And so I got out Baby Rodzilla. I've never fished this rod before. It only been out for a little while. And first fish I ever caught was a 16-inch rainbow trout. And this rod handled it no problem. Next fish I caught was about a little 6-inch brown trout. Rod handled it no problem. This is a great rod. It really, like I said, it is my favorite rod. It's a very sensitive rod. It feels great in the hand. A lot of triple zoom rods, you'll notice as you get out to their longer lengths, they just don't feel as good when you're casting them. I don't have this problem with that rod. This rod feels good in the hand. I forget it's there at all 3 lengths. And it's a great rod. Like I said, my favorite rod in my lineup right now. And if I'm reaching for a rod on most of my streams, this is the rod that I use. Even on tighter streams where 8 foot might be a little bit too long, I'm gonna pull this rod out and use it as bow and arrow casting. I love this rod. I really do. At the same time I picked up Baby Rodzilla, I picked up probably my second favorite rod, and that is Darth Quattro. Now this is a quadruple zoom rod that weighs, I believe, 1.7 ounces. It's extremely light. It is fishable at 5'6", 6'6", 7'6", and 8'6". It is available in 2 different actions. I went with the 6'4". They also have a 5'5". Again, when I fish small streams, a 5'5" just would have been a little bit too soft. The 6'4" fits really well for what I'm looking for. And where it is carbon fiber all the way up, I maintain really good action with this rod. This rod I have caught a 17-inch trout on. I was not expecting to catch a fish that big on this rod. It just happened. And this rod handled it extremely well. I've caught little 2-inch bluegill on this rod. I've caught little 3-inch trout on this rod. It's very sensitive. You feel everything, and those little fish are going to be fun, especially if you opt for the 5'5". But it still has the backbone that I was looking for the possibility of having those bigger fish. Like I said, I fish a lot of small streams, but there are bigger fish in those small streams. And this rod is one that I can rely on to catch those bigger fish. And so it's one, like I said, it's one of my favorite rods. And a big part of that is because of the versatility of it. I mean, you can jump on these smallest of small streams at 5'6", or you can jump on something a little bit bigger at 8'6" and adjust your line accordingly, but you're going to have a rod that can handle pretty much anything you throw at it there. Again, my second favorite rod in my lineup. Love this rod. The next one that I picked up last month in June of 2023. and that would be the Wasatch Tenkara Samurai. Talked a little bit about this rod being one that was out when I bought my T-Hunter. And this rod I got for my wife. I took her out this last weekend. We caught her first fish on the Tenkara rod, and it was great. She said she enjoys it. Whether she really did or not, we'll find out whether she goes with me again. But she has made it clear this is her rod. She will allow me to use her rod, but this is her rod. So hopefully that's a good sign. But this rod is great. It feels incredible. It's fishable at 11, 12, and 13 feet. So it kind of fits into that niche, kind of like the Baby Rodzilla, where it jumps up in 1 foot increments instead of 1.5 foot increments. Its collapsed length, on the Baby Rodzilla, collapsed length is 19 inches. On Darth Quattro, 17 and a quarter. But then going back to this one, collapsed length is 18.5 inches. This particular rod is 7.3, which for some of what we fish is a little bit more on the stiffer side. My T-Hunter is a 7.3. Really, I went with the 7.3 because that's what they had in stock. And so we fished it. Both of us like it. We both caught fish on this rod. I haven't talked to anyone that's fished this rod that doesn't like it. It's got a smaller handle on it. Ruben, when I was talking to him originally about this rod, he designed this rod for women, for more petite anglers. Actually, one of his close friends has carpal tunnel, and so he designed this rod being something that he could handle easier. It doesn't hurt his wrists to use. So he designed that with certain audience in mind, and it's grown to a lot more than just that audience because it is a gorgeous rod. It is very well weighted, very balanced, and it fishes extremely well. A lot of people really enjoy it. It's a great rod. It really is. We haven't had this rod very long. We've only had it out a couple times, and like I said, it's been great for the few times that we've had it out, and I look forward to getting it out again. And that brings me to my last rod. Back in May, I was invited to go fishing with Ruben again, and we were going out to a pond up in Ogden where he's located, and he brought out a rod that he only had one of at the time. It was a prototype, and I was very excited to get to check this rod out in person. That is Phoenix Rising. This rod is the first Tenkara spey rod. It comes in at 6.3 meters, which comes out to be about 20.6 feet, and collapses down to about 28 inches. Now, some other rods that I've fished really quick. I have fished the Psycho, which is the first Tenkara glow rod. That's their Wasatch Tenkara rod. I believe that one is 14.5 and 16 feet. I have fished Rodzilla. That is a big fish rod. It is fishable at 16 and 17.5 feet. Both of them are good rods. They both feel heavier because they are big rods. Phoenix Rising is a bigger rod, but because of that spey handle design, does not feel like it. I fished this rod for over an hour and did not mind one bit. With the spey handle, it's really nice. You hold onto that front grip. You just rest that butt end on your waist, and you're right here. You go to cast two-handed. You can do one-handed. This rod feels phenomenal. It comes in at just over 9 ounces, so just over half a pound, and it's incredible. I caught a 16-inch trout. I was the first person to catch a fish on the Phoenix Rising when just the prototype was out, and that 16-inch trout felt like a 3-inch trout. I played with it. There's a video out on Ruben's Facebook page of me catching a fish with that rod. I played with the fish a little bit. I let him drag the rod around. I literally, the fight, even with playing with it, was less than 20 seconds. It was just pull the fish in. This rod is truly amazing. We've got people planning incredible things with this rod. I know Aaron, who I interviewed back on the Tennessee episode, he is currently in Alaska with this rod, and we're hoping to get him back on, hopefully for either the next episode or the following episode, to talk about that trip, his experience with both this rod. He's got Rodzilla. He's got a couple other, I believe, Tenkara Rod Company rods that he took up there with him as well. We're going to just talk to him about his entire trip, hear the story, talk to him about what he caught, what his experiences are with the rods, how they held up. It's going to be great. But this rod, for me, it filled the gap that I was trying to fill with the Gocher rod. It is a little bit longer than the Gocher rod, and that's okay with me. It's a little bit lighter than the Gocher rod, which is definitely okay with me. The spay handle makes it to where I can fish this rod all day. This Gocher rod, I fished for an hour. I generally will fish for about an hour at a time, if that, and I don't like it. I can feel the fish through this rod. I cannot feel it through the Gocher rod. When I compare my big water rods, being Phoenix Rising and the cheap Gocher rod, I've seen big fish caught on the Gocher rod. I've not caught anything huge on it, but it's just not a pleasant experience. Versus this 8.2 Action Phoenix, you can feel small fish. You can feel big fish. You're going to enjoy catching everything. Yes, if you catch a little 4-inch, 5-inch trout, you're going to fling that sucker out of the water with this rod. It's going to happen. But with that being said, you're still going to feel the bite. You're not going to miss it. You're not going to be sitting there wondering, was that a fish? Was it the bottom? You're going to feel, you're going to know. Love this rod. All of the Wasatch rods you can pick up on their website. Again, I'll throw a link to Wasatch Tenkara for their rods in my description. I'm going to throw a link to Dragon Tail Tenkara because I like their rods too. I really do. Wasatch has been the direction that I decided to go, and part of that is because of my business. They've got their big fish warranty, as I call it, just their warranty on their rods, that if you break it while catching a fish, they're going to replace it. And as a guide, that was something that I couldn't turn down. It was too good of a deal for me. If rods break, it happens. But knowing that I have that extra insurance on the rod is phenomenal. But moving forward, later this year, I have plans to fish a lot of other rods. Hopefully I get to actually fish most of those rods that I am planning. I don't want to spoil which rods are pending right now, but Peyton, when you hear this, I need to pick a couple rods up from you in the near future. But you know, it's been great to be able to fish all these different rods. I've currently got 11 rods in my lineup. 11? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 rods in my lineup. I've fished a total of 15 rods. Yes, 15 rods. One rod that I fished that I haven't mentioned, I fished a smaller Gocher rod. It's a green one. I forget what it's called. You can find them on Amazon. There's a lot of videos on YouTube about that rod. But I fished one of those, and again, kind of like the Red Fox, it just wasn't that pleasant of an experience. It's a forward heavy rod. It does catch fish. If you're looking for an entry-level rod at around $20, it's not a bad option. The downside is their collapsed lengths are still very long. That rod, I believe, is only about 4 inches shorter than 3 or 4 inches shorter than the Red Fox here, which is 27 inches. Their collapsed lengths are long. And so for me, it wasn't that great of an experience. I know Tenkara Addict has a video of him fishing that green rod. There's a couple other ones floating around on YouTube that you can find fairly easy. And like, again, not a bad rod. If you're looking for an entry-level rod, go ahead and pick it up if it's what's in your budget. I would recommend trying to save up a little bit more. If you're looking for a good entry-level rod, go for something like the Dragon Tail Shadowfire or the Wasatch Tenkara Middle Fork. Those are going to be really good entry-level rods. They're going to fill what you're looking for and get you into Tenkara while being able to enjoy the experience. As you're looking to expand, and depending on what kind of fish you're targeting, you might want to look at something bigger like a T-Hunter or Rodzilla. If you have questions about any rods that I've mentioned in the video, feel free to reach out to me and ask questions. I'm not afraid to answer those, and I'll give you my honest opinion on everything that I fished. So far, like I said, there's not very many rods that I've fished that I have not enjoyed. Those rods primarily being cheap Amazon rods that I don't enjoy. Another rod I fished that I forgot to mention, Gocher actually does make a Tenkara rod. The one that I fished, and it is Tenkara specific, not just a fixed line rod like the Red Fox and that green rod. It's the one that I fished is a triple zoom rod. I believe it was 8'6". I want to say 8'6", 10 foot. No, it was 8, 9'6", and 11 foot, if I remember right. And it's not a bad rod. As far as Gocher rods go, cheap rods go, I was very impressed with that rod. It was actually my dad's first rod. He got it for, I want to say Father's Day last year. Father's Day or his birthday, one of the two. But he's fished that rod several times. We've caught a lot of fish on that rod. My dad and I actually went out to a spot in Idaho that will remain unnamed. It was in the Sun Valley area. Yeah, I'll give you that, up in the Sawtooth Mountains. And he fished that rod. I fished my Middle Fork. We fished for about 2.5 hours. And between the two of us, we caught and netted 100 fish. That was by far the best fishing experience I have ever had. It was just literally every cast, we were catching a fish. And I've never had anything remotely close to that. Since then, I've gone to that same spot. And while we've had success in that spot, it's never been to the same magnitude that we had on that trip. But really, truly, if you have any questions about any rods, feel free to reach out. I know a few of you have taken me up on that offer. You've messaged me on my Instagram and asked questions. I really do mean it. If you have questions, reach out to me, whether it's on my personal Instagram, on the podcast Instagram. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions. These rods have all been great to me. Even cheapo $7.50 Amazon rod, they've all been great. This rod, like I said, not the best rod, filled a purpose. It was cheap. I wanted to know if I liked it before I spent money on it, and it filled that purpose. A lot of people, I think, when they buy this cheap rod, it's a similar purpose. They're looking to just see if they like it, and it's great. But other than that, it's been great just to experience different rods. Like I said, I've got plans for later this year to fish several other rods. Again, Peyton, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. But it's been great, and I really enjoy getting to fish these different rods. As I do fish more rods, I will continue to do little review videos after I fish a few of them. That way, I can do short little videos like this that can be just little informational videos. But again, let me know if you have any questions. Some of these rods, if you're targeting big fish, are going to do a lot better than others. With that being said, the yellow Middle Fork here, they're catching steelhead in Pennsylvania. It's a 6'4" action that's available in a 7'3" as well. It can be a very stiff rod or it can be a softer rod, but it's going to fish well on a lot of different situations. The T-Hunter, I have the 7'3", it's available in an 8'2". Again, they're catching steelhead. They're catching a lot of different fish on this rod. It's going to fill a lot of different needs in a lot of different areas. The Sharpshooter, fishable in 7'3" and 6'4". They're catching steelhead on this rod. Darth Quattro, there was a guy that caught a 22-inch rainbow trout on the 5'5" action Darth Quattro. Do I recommend that? Absolutely not. This rod is not made for fish like that, but it can do it. It did it. A lot of that's going to come down to the skill of the angler, though. Baby Rodzilla, my favorite rod in the entire lineup, or my entire lineup. Love this rod. Love this rod. And it has been phenomenal. Samurai, haven't fished it a ton, but it's been good so far. And of course, my Nissen rod. I do love this rod. It doesn't get enough love because I don't want to break it. And if I do break it, I don't want to have to wait 2 months for a replacement part. But it does get fished. It's a good rod. I just need to find more water that works better for this rod with its lengths that are just a little bit too long and too short for where I normally fish. But it's a good rod. It feels phenomenal in the hand. And as far as balance goes, out of all of my rods, except for maybe Baby Rodzilla. Yeah, Baby Rodzilla I like a little bit better for balance-wise. But as far as balance goes, this I would say is the most balanced rod I owned. It is truly amazing. If you can spend the extra money and get a rod from Japan and you want to try it, the Pro Spec is a great rod to choose. It really is. But again, feel free to reach out to me with any questions you have about any rods that I've talked about in this video, or if you have any questions about any other rods that I might have fished, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to give you my honest opinion on any of the rods that I've talked about. And I don't sugarcoat things. If I don't like something, I will tell you, hence cheap Amazon rods are garbage. But feel free to reach out. I really will give you my honest opinion on it. If it's not a rod that I fished, I might look into fishing it because I like to know things about rods. I like to know which ones I do and don't like. And I like to hear other people's input too. If you agree or disagree with one of my comments in the video, feel free to reach out and let me know. I'd be more than happy to talk with you about them and answer any questions or concerns about any of them. I am still looking for people to fill spots on the 50 States of Tenkara series. We've only got about 4 states done. That leaves 46. So we still got a ways to go. I love talking with all of you that have reached out to me and talked about different areas and different states, different things you're targeting and trying. I've got to convince a listener to drop the fly rod and just take his Tenkara rod on a trip. And he messaged me after the trip and said that he was extremely glad he did. He caught a lot of fish on the Tenkara rod. And it was a spot that he was really worried because he'd only ever fished it with the fly rod because he thought he needed that extra reach. But, you know, it's truly amazing what you can do when you put your mind to it and just give it a chance. But with that being said, feel free to reach out to me. Let me know if you're interested in coming on for an episode of the podcast. You can reach me on Instagram at Let's Talk Tenkara, or find me on my personal Instagram at brendan.harden_Tenkara. And feel free to shoot me an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning in, and tune in next time.
This has been the Let's Talk Tenkara podcasts, hosted by Brendan Harden. You can reach us on Instagram at Let's Talk Tenkara. You can also shoot us an email at letstalktenkara@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out with any suggestions for future episodes, or if you or someone you know would like to be featured on the show, or you think they'd be a good fit, shoot us a message and we'll be happy to talk to you. Thank you for tuning in, and tune in next time and Let's Talk Tenkara, a Salt Lake Tenkara production.